I'll say that I know the concepts are more or less easy. They're simple, but the actual process of figuring out video software was very difficult. So I'll go through kind of my process of how I figured things out, as well as what you actually have to do to produce the videos that I produced. I'll start with the. Hang on, okay, sorry. I'll start with the audio side of things because obviously that's the first step. There are maybe a couple three there are multiple ways to do these kind of projects. One question I've gotten a lot so far is, did you record the video and the audio at the same time, particularly on the Beethoven? And the answer is no. That would be extremely difficult to do. You essentially have to be even better than a live performance to do that correctly. It is possible to splice in audio if you are starting with essentially like a scratch take of video, but you have to sync up so perfectly that it just becomes kind of a nightmare to really produce something high quality. So what I did, and what I recommend anyone does for something like either of these projects, is to start with the audio and essentially lip sync the video on top of it. That's what Jim Nova does for Star Wars videos. That's what Joe Alessi does for a lot of his videos like this. I think that's kind of the standard. Some people may call that cheating, but it's not a competition. It's all about the final product. If it is a competition, obviously don't do that. So let me go ahead and start by just going to. I should also say I use a lot of free software because I do not have a Mac, and so I don't have access to Logic or Adobe. Well, I could use Adobe Premiere Pro, but I like cheap software. If I can get a hold of something that will do the same job but doesn't cost me, $40 a month or something, I'll use that. So I used MuseScore to set up a click track. The click track is kind of the framework for the entire project. There are lots of ways you can do this. Steve Peterson recently put out a really amazing video on his YouTube page with the San Antonio Symphony. It's way more complex than what I'm doing, and he does use all the fancy softwares that video professionals use. And for his version of a click track, the conductor, was conducting, and he essentially went beat by beat, putting in manually every single beat of the music. And I tried a version of that. The first time I tried to do the Adagio for Strings project, I actually tried to record at least the audio back when I was at Baylor, like 8 years ago. This is way easier. It's a little more tedious. Actually, no, it's a lot less tedious. It's just easier, and I think better. You'll end up with a better final product, I think, this way, because it's completely consistent. So essentially, I took my score, I copied it, and made a sonata pathétique with click version of that, and I added an instrument, which here you just simply go to the instruments section, and you can just add things from here. If you don't use MuseScore, obviously that will be a separate process for Finale or Sibelius or whatever you're using, but that should not be that difficult. And then from there, I went into my editor, kind of trying to demonstrate, I would just basically A, B. I would, depending on whether or not I wanted to slow down or speed up, I might have added more beats in. All right, kind of like that. And then from there, after I got all the beats set up, for a lot of this, it was simple. But let me go ahead and go to a more difficult thing, basically cadenza, and show kind of what I did for that right here. Okay, so this is essentially one big cadenza. It's completely unmetered, essentially, and when playing with the quartet, they just wait for you. You don't have to worry about it. But in this kind of project, there are several ways to kind of try to tackle this. But I found the easiest way that made editing the most consistent was simply to try to, I added a bunch of extra beats here so that I could hear each one. I'll go ahead and play this measure, actually. So I tried to make sure that I gave myself enough time to actually get all the notes out. It ended up being maybe a tiny bit too short for ease, but it was definitely possible. And then I put the burden on my performance rather than on trying to get all the editing to match up later on. It took me maybe like 3 takes to get that in the right time frame. So it wasn't too difficult. But basically, you'll see at the top here, try to highlight it, these, tempo markings. Once I had all the actual click track beats down, then it was time to actually get the timing right. Especially in these slower sections, there's a lot of changes, like beat to beat, trying to simulate rubato. I should say this is also the method that I've seen most often used for film score recordings. The composer usually will make their own click tracks in Finale, probably very similarly to this, and they will have, they'll even be able to print out exactly what tempos they're using on which beats. It's not usually as complex as this, but the end result is much, much better than simply, playing a straight metronome, right? So I'll go ahead and play a little bit of this so you can kind of see what I was working with. If you'll notice, actually, right here, 29 beats a minute on this quarter, very, very slightly slower on this one. Again, trying to simulate the feeling of playing live and just a little more passion on that note. It's not really something that even I notice when I'm listening to the final recording, but I do think it does add some flexibility, some liveliness to what is otherwise a fairly robotic process. So after you get the click track all settled, it's time to export parts, right? And so I would just simply hit the export button, go to MP3, and I think it would export all of the parts, and I just take the one I want. So I don't have to do that. I already have it all set up. So going to the next step, actually, let me go ahead and show you Adagio for strings, just so you can see what that one looks like. Sorry, my computer is being very slow. Okay, so this is the score for Adagio for strings. You can see it's very similar. Let me zoom in on the actual beats. Same idea, just really trying to feel out beat by beat exactly how slow or fast I wanted it. I can go ahead and close this now. So let me, let me share the next, the audio editing software I use, which is, what is this called? Audacity. Right, you can use GarageBand, you can use pretty much anything that has multiple track settings and the ability to edit, crop, that kind of thing. Audacity is free. You can download a reverb plugin for free. You can download auto tuning for free. It's very powerful. It's kind of ugly compared to Logic and that kind of thing, and Logic is way, way more powerful. But if you don't want to spend hundreds of dollars, then this will do the job. I've used this for pretty much every project and every, competition recording, audition submission, I've ever needed. So I think it'll get the job done. So let me actually start with a new project. And I think I'll have to share that one too. So hang on just 1 second. It's a separate window. Okay. So, right, once you get the click track, again, the framework for everything, you want to import it. I'm not going to do that because that's slow. I'm simply going to copy the one I have. That's a little bit faster. But you import the file, and it will look something like 3, 2, 1, maybe? No? Okay, we got the Wheel of Death. Here we go. Okay, so it'll look something like this, right? This is not really enough to just start recording because it starts right on beat 1, right? You can edit the finale file or MuseScore file to include extra beats and add measures. For my purposes, it was a little too complicated to do that with the way I set up Beethoven in particular. So instead, what I do, generate a new track and then add a separate rhythm track as a lead-in. To do this, I need to know the exact tempo that the movement starts at, which in this case is 88 beats a minute at 120. So what is that? 172 for the quarter, 2 beats, and I'm going to give myself actually 9 bars of lead-in. I say I'm doing 9 bars because you want 1 extra bar that you can delete whenever you line everything up. Otherwise, you have a harder time lining up the 2 click tracks with this method. And I'll show you what I mean by that. So zooming in a bit. So using the time shift tool, whatever software you have will probably have something very similar to this, very similar looking. I can simply move this to the right. And I apologize for this slow computer. I have a few things up already, and this laptop is not exactly state of the art. So it may take a little bit to render. Are there any questions so far? I want to make sure I'm not glossing over anything. And Brent, if you can, kind of interrupt me whenever there's a question about a step I'm going over, that would be great.
Well, this is an obvious question, but how long, obviously you've been on Audacity for such a long time. What would you say the learning curve is just to get, not Audacity, excuse me, MuseScore, to get things into MuseScore? That's quite a process, correct?
Yeah, there definitely is a learning curve for both MuseScore and Audacity. MuseScore is fairly simple. It has gone through a lot of revisions, but really you can do everything I did with just a mouse. Like you can literally input the notes with just a mouse, and it would take forever, but you can do that. So the learning curve is really more about optimization. There are a lot of keyboard shortcuts. I'm having trouble with this, so I'm gonna just pretend like this works and delete this. I'll go back to the other project. I don't know why it's not working. But yeah, no, I would say it probably took me about not really more than 5 to 10 hours of use over just kind of messing around with it with a few projects. Like I think I started with The Incredibles. That was my first thing I messed around with MuseScore. And if you just take the time to look at keyboard shortcuts and kind of work on memorizing them, it's not too bad. Audacity is similar. Audacity is a little bit more of a learning curve, but there's a lot of documentation over every little tiny thing you could possibly want to do on it. So that is not, it's not terrible, I think. Let me see if this will move. Okay, so this one for some reason is working, but you can see here I can, obviously align things the way I want to. I'm going to actually undo that. Okay. The reason I'm emphasizing like how to line things up properly is because I think a major point I'll probably make over and over in this is that organization is crucial when you're editing these things. You don't want a messy project, and you want to have kind of a system for how you record things, what parts to record when. I'm going to kind of go over my system. You may find other methods to be easier for your purposes or for a certain project, but I think it's important to do things more or less the same way every time, or it just turns into a huge hassle editing things that are messy along the way. And I'll give an example. So like, just kind of maybe doing a quick demonstration. I used to, when I first used Audacity, I would record in very, very small chunks, just making sure I got things right until, like I would go until I messed something up. So let's say it was here. Let me see. I think this will work. Okay, so I'm just going to try to do a little demonstration. Hang on. I'm going to move things out of the way because of the video Zoom call. So let's work. I apologize. Never mind. The point is, I was trying to move this section of track up here. Actually, I think I can do it. There we go. I think this will work. Yeah. So it would be the other way around. But like, so for example, if you are going to splice, which you are more than likely going to need to, unless you are just a god player, more so than I am, I recommend not recording this way. Small chunks, you record the next chunk, then the next one. Because one, if things happen to be out of alignment, which sometimes because of computer error, this will be over here. And then you have to line that up and you have to go back up to the click track, and it's just a huge mess. So this is kind of what I do to avoid that. Let me just undo all of this. Come on. Okay. So what I do is I will, once I have the click track set up with the lead-in click track as well, going back up to here. So this is all set up. This is not there yet, the recording. What I will do is I will do scratch takes. This is something that I learned from, I'm trying to remember. Oh, right. Working with Houghton Horns. Houghton Horns has a much more professional setup than I do. And maybe I should also talk about kind of my physical setup, how I did all this. I'll get to that in a second. But scratch takes make everything so much easier for editing. And what a scratch take is essentially you just run through the whole thing no matter what happens. It's good practice for performance as well. But what that does is it essentially gives you a template for the part. Things will be maybe out of alignment, but you can kind of generate notes on like when you need to fix certain things. Like let's say this was late. I'm just going to go ahead and demonstrate kind of what I would do. So if this was late and I didn't need to re-record it, I just needed to align it. Actually, I have a better example. So you will probably find that your timing is not perfect between parts. So I'm going to go ahead and play this section real quick so you have some context. All right. So, bum, bum, that tag, right? If I zoom in, you may be able to see very slight differences in the starts of the notes. Hang on, sorry. There we go. I'm using a trackpad. I normally use a mouse for this kind of work. I don't have access to one. So you can see right there, between first and second part, there's actually a pretty big chunk of time that is lost. And I actually probably did not catch that when I was editing, or it just does not matter in the long run. But you're going to have that happen quite often. You can see the bass part is farther ahead than the third and second parts. If I wanted to fix that, so let's say I want to do that now. What I would do after recording scratch takes for everything, there's probably easier ways to do this in Logic, but in Audacity, you kind of have to do this process where you copy the line you want, delete it, or silence it, generate a new track, paste it. It's going to be in the same time frame. Move it back up to where you want to compare to, which with the trackpad is going to be difficult. And I promise I won't go over every single tiny thing I did to edit this. But I think this kind of organizing work, including aligning things, is extremely important. Probably the most time-saving thing you can do. So I'm kind of talking over what I'm actually doing. So you can see, again, mouse would make this easier for me. You can also see something maybe maybe not all of you are aware of. Trombones have a delayed attack. Like when we start, it's kind of like a violin in that it is soft at first. It doesn't sound like that, and this goes by, you know, in 5/100ths of a second. So it's really not that delayed. However, the start of a note can actually be kind of fuzzy, which is why it doesn't always matter that it's exactly perfectly aligned. But that's something, you know, from an audio engineer standpoint that is important to note. Like here, because there's noise, I can't even really see the start of the note. I'm just assuming it's kind of somewhere here. But once I line that up, what I would do is then recombine it with the track that I took it from, which is third. So highlighting both of those. Actually, that did not work. Hang on. This is where things can go horribly, horribly wrong. And if you don't catch it, it's really bad, because if you accidentally merge two tracks together, save it, and don't go back, then you have irrevocably like merged two separate parts that you can no longer edit for anything. So you essentially have to re-record if there's any mistakes in it whatsoever. Mix and render. So this is a lot of the work once you're done recording. Now, if there is something that you need to re-record, obviously you don't need to do the copy, paste, delete thing. You just simply record it in a spot, and then you do the same mix and render thing as before. But that is like, this kind of thing probably takes, you know, 2-3 times more time than actually just playing, at least if you know the part well. And I prefer to, even though it takes more time, I think it's usually better to kind of cut your losses for these really, really small mistakes and just get it in post for these kind of projects, because you can absolutely just go back, you know, delete this. Let's say I'm going to start recording a little bit farther back. This is the bass part, so I'm going to sing. Where's my record button? right? Right? Or whatever the third part was. So, ignoring when I was talking, you can do that and it may work out. But I think when you're playing as much as you will be recording all four parts for, something, or all eight parts for Adagio for strings, you want to save your chops as much as possible, for one. For two, it can just be, it's a lot less frustrating, doing it in post, because you're going to get it right, even if it's more tedious. So, that's one recommendation. Um, so once I had everything lined up and I had everything kind of fixed when I needed to go over a part again, um, my next step was basically just some minor edits, like normalizing, I mean, really, I don't need to go through all that. But basically, you want to add reverb, because without reverb, it does not sound good. So down here in my mix, that's reverb. Um, and maybe you guys already know how to do all this. Perhaps you know how to do it on Logic and way better than me. But just to kind of cover all my bases. All right, so when adding reverb, it's important to not add it to the original tracks in case you ever want to go back and edit them. These you want to leave completely alone, essentially. Um, so basically that mix and render thing I did to combine tracks, going to mix and render to a new track. And I'm not going to actually do this because it takes a little bit of time. But once you have that, you have you'll have something that looks more or less like this that I muted. It may actually, mixing and rendering a lot of tracks tends to amplify the waves, so you may actually need to you may need to edit your amplification settings. Here, I have it here. You can move this bar around, but if you're clipping, your reverb is not going to sound good, right? So it's better to move these way, way down before you mix and render. For Audacity, I downloaded a plugin called Ambience. It looks like this, lots and lots of dials. I didn't bother with any of that. I just used the factory presets. And I actually used, for this one, I just used Dark Concert Hall preset. It works pretty well. You can mess around. It has about like 50 or so presets, and it's fun to mess around with that. I definitely spent a lot of time just trying to get the sound right. For Adagio for strings, I'm going to open that file real quick. I use actually 3 separate reverbs. Because for a quartet, I think you need less cover, especially for something like Beethoven's Sonata Pathétique, where there's so much intricacy between the parts. Adding too much wetness to the sound just made it muddy and made it seem not quite live. However, with a trombone choir, if you're doing, I would say 8 parts, maybe 6 parts or more, the full sound of a choir is already more or less muddy, to the point where adding reverb can actually clarify certain aspects of the sound, the mids or the lows or something like that. So that's all just kind of a personal choice. But I think you definitely want to spend some time getting the reverb down right, because it really adds the sense of polish and professionalness that people are kind of expecting, especially in these days when everything is online. This is taking forever. This may or may not work. Let me go ahead and exit out of this, free up some RAM.
So John, let me ask you, when you added reverb, why did you not mess with those 2 tracks, the originals? Because then you can't go back and change it and go back to where you started from, I assume. You can't start over.
Yes. Yeah, I've definitely added reverb to the original tracks in my earlier projects, and then went back the next day and realized that I can't change it at all. Like, if I ever wanted to change my mind, then that's not possible. It also can tend to sound bad, frankly. Like, you want the clarity of the original track. It's completely dry. That's also something I should mention. Your recording space does matter. I recorded in the summer, right, in like June-ish, I think, for the Beethoven, and it was very hot, and I had to turn all my air conditioners off, and it was pretty awful. Another reason why I didn't want to record the video and audio at the same time, because you would have just seen it was not fun. It reminded me of my marching band days. try, I would, these are basic things that you've probably already been told, but, try to record with your microphone about, maybe 10 to 15 feet away and higher than you if possible, slightly off center. Your setup, I have a very long wire. You want to make sure your click track is not bleeding through your headphones. So you want to make sure that it's loud enough to hear when you're playing, but not so loud that it bleeds into the mic. Those kind of considerations, that's all kind of in the setup. It does make a difference. I actually missed some click track bleed in Adagio for strings. You can still hear it even on the YouTube version, which is lower quality. But had I caught that in the parts earlier, I would not have had, like, when I caught it, it was way too late in the process to really go back and fix it, because I was already at video editing. So, like, kind of going back to the question you asked, Brent, like, you want to have as much clarity for each individual part as possible, which includes not editing it past the point of no return, if at all possible. So let me. Right, I have to open it up. Just one second. Let's see. Let me see what time it is. Actually, I want to make sure I have enough time to get to the video editing, and questions, which that's actually way more complicated. I am glossing over a lot of details here and exactly what kind of edits I did, what tools I used to edit them. Actually, let me ask you this, Brent. Do you think it would be useful to go over audio splicing? Like, if you actually have to put like notes together that were not previously together, middle of a note splicing, or should we go into video editing?
Why don't you, maybe spend 5 minutes on splicing, if you don't mind. I think that'd be
Sure.
helpful.
Okay.
And let me ask you a question while you're pulling that up.
Sure.
This is like so selfish of me, but I've done, I don't know, 6 CDs on Pro Tools, and I have this, like, I only can do Pro Tools. That's like all I know. And do you think it would be worth it to try to learn Audacity or Logic, or should I just stick with what I know? I mean, this looks like I can do everything in Pro Tools, but is Pro Tools being phased out? I don't see anybody using that anymore. Do you have any thought on that?
Not particularly, because I don't know the software all that well myself. I know people really like Logic these days. I have never used them because I have not committed to buying a Mac or anything like that. But I would say Audacity is like the it's base software. Like, if you're already using Pro Tools, then there's probably nothing that you can't do in that right. Audacity can do. You can use both. I mean, if you have the original audio files and you want to make an edit that for some reason one software allows you to do, there's no reason you can't use both, and just import and export files between projects. Okay, let me go back.
Thanks.
Yeah, the basic process, I think, with any software is going to be the same. Of course, the looks will be different and the buttons will be in different places. But like I said, I use Audacity simply because it's free, basically. And it's also what I'm familiar with, of course, at this point. Okay, so let me go ahead and share this. So let me find, actually, I'll find a really big splice. The biggest splice I made in this, people asked me how I played a certain bass part. Let me have to move some things around, sorry. And the answer is that I did not. I cannot play bass parts on my tenor quite to the same degree that I could with the bass, and I didn't have a bass at this time. So let me find this part. Okay, I think it's right before this. Yep, there it is. Okay, so I'm gonna isolate that so you guys can hear it. And I actually can play it back at half tempo. Maybe if you have a really good ear, you can hear the splice. But literally every single note in this is spliced. I could not do this pedal A flat to C to all that stuff. So let me see here. Let me play it back half tempo. That's close enough. You can't really hear the pitch, but you can kind of tell there's some rearticulation in there. So basically, I will approximate what I had to do. So I need to create a new track here. So actually, let me zoom in a little bit so you can see the notes better. Okay, so you can see kind of the delineation of each note here. So I recorded basically 2 notes at a time, A flat to C, C to E flat, right? Um, and so what I would do, let's say I wanted to do the C to E flat and splice that in. I got the A flat to C already. So this is going to be my file. Oh, hang on. I didn't want to do that. Copy. Okay. So this is kind of what it would look like. If I, oh, sorry. Again, the trackpad is losing inputs every now and then. Apologize for that. Okay, here we go. And I'm going to go to a new track. Okay, this is being difficult. I can kind of explain a little bit of what I'm about to do. So, okay, the screen is not really big enough for these purposes. So, essentially, again, you kind of have to know the delineation. This right here, the C is more or less lined up right now. It's kind of in the middle of the C. Okay, now you can see things. So basically, you kind of want to just cut off half of the note in the middle, in the body of the note. So silence that. And you want to do the same thing in more or less the same place with a little bit of overlap for the other note. And I'm not exactly sure where this is. I would be checking more readily if this is the actual splice. You want to zoom in, make sure they're overlapped properly and synced up properly. And then you basically just fade in and out of each one. That's the simple version. There are definitely tools to do this in a more professional sense, but I found this works good enough for a basic splice. And I don't know if this will work, but we can try and see. Okay. Yeah, again, it has to be lined up for it to work properly, but just that's kind of the quick version. Yeah, it still kind of works. Right? And that is still technically that's not the same thing, but the point is, like, when it's going by that fast, no one's going to notice. I also had some splices similar to this for Audacity, or for Adagio for strings. That was much more for the purpose of if I had something that was slightly out of tune or I wanted to cover up a breath, I might copy a part of the note, put it in another track like this, and just shift it over so it kind of went over the breath. That was for the case when, like, re-recording the line would have taken up either more effort than I had the chops for at the time, or just like the basically from an artistic perspective, like if it's just a breath marking, it's not really worth going over that for something like Adagio for strings in my mind, because like it's just a long tone essentially, right? So if it sounds like a good long tone when I splice it, then I'm not too concerned about the purity of it. And that reminds me of a story actually you told me, Brent, which is just that I remember you were talking about, I think it was, what was the song?
Was it a Stentorian?
No, it was Errors of Time. It was Joe Lex's recording of Errors of Time. And you asked him, how do you make that phrase? And he's like, Brent, it's a recording, Yeah.
Yeah, that was really embarrassing. So John, this is profoundly stupid, but let me ask, when you actually go back to record those 2 notes, are you recording to a device and then importing that recording to Audacity, or are you recording directly to Audacity?
Yeah, I'm recording directly to Audacity. I can actually kind of show you. I have a USB mic. I used a H6 for everything. I need to get better equipment, but basically it just registers as a microphone in Audacity. And so I hit record and it pops up right in the program. So, like I was saying, for that particular splice, like I said, the worst one of the entire, most, well, anyway, basically I would try to do it live and it would sound something like, so da-da, 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 and I would just splice all 3 of those cuts together, right?
That's helpful.
Yeah. I think that about covers the sound side of things. To be honest, I think the sound is probably more involved and more complex than the video editing. The video editing is relatively simple, actually, in concept. It's just that, if you're not used to the software, the buttons are just crazy to like there's just a lot of menuing and things you have to kind of get used to, and that takes a lot of looking through the help section and whatnot. So let me go ahead and go to that.
So let me just real quick
Yeah.
before we move on. It's not really a question, but just kind of a recap. Help me with this. So let's say we're going to do a quartet of yourself. You're going to actually get it in some kind of notation. You're going to make a MIDI file or a click track or something that you're going to have, and you discussed how you do that. That's first. And then you're playing along with that one part at a time, right? You obviously record one part and you record the next part. Is there a sequence to the part that you like to record first or last or second? I think that might be important to know.
Yeah, there is. I meant to mention that. Yeah. So it really depends on the piece because, for example, if you want to record the part that either lets you have a tuning bedrock. So I usually record the bass part first if that's kind of something like for Adagio for strings. I might record maybe the first part first and then the bass part, or the other way around. It depends on the part, just so I have something to tune against. For the third movement of the Beethoven Sonata Pathétique in particular, I actually recorded the first part first because of the melody. Like the way I had it organized, you know, I mean, you remember this, but da 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 dum, ba da da da. You know, the other three parts just have varying sections of that arpeggiatic section. So recording that and trying to play off of that, really, I didn't think that was going to be very useful. So it's very much on a case-by-case basis, but as a general rule, it's bass, then first, then inner voices.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
And you said whatever part you record, you really do kind of the whole thing, right? You just, what did you call that? Your junk track? No, your scratch track.
Scratch track, yeah.
I like that
you'd be
idea.
surprised how much on the scratch track actually gets put in.
Oh, I know.
Yeah.
I know Baylor Brass recordings, Stentorian recordings, you know, we would get to take 57 and then get down into post-production, you know, a year and a half later, and it's like we would use take 2.
Right.
It's like whatever.
Yeah. There is a little more wiggle room, I think, for later takes getting into a recording, multi-track recording, because, you know, you're not limited to one day when you're exhausted on take 57, right? So there are definitely times when I would come back and I'd say I'm done with the recording. That's it. I'm kind of a little bit perfectionist about this, so I have to accept splicing is okay, little things here and there are okay. But you know, I'd come back the next day and I'd listen back to it, you know, ready to go on to video editing, and I'd be, I can't. So I'd get my setup all over again, and I'd record, you know, 2 notes or something. You know, and so that did happen for a while, but you know, it was hot enough down in my basement that I think that was motivation enough to kind of wrap things up and go on to the nice air-conditioned video section. So speaking
of,
why don't we
get into video? Go ahead. Yeah. Thanks.
So I'm going to go ahead and open up my video. So I'm a big fan of cheap software. This is VSDC. It is a free software. Up until recently, you could use every single aspect of it for free. Now you have to pay $20 a year to use the full suite. For the Beethoven video, that was necessary. I'm going to go ahead and open up the Beethoven project. Again, movement 3. I'm going to go through Beethoven first because, believe it or not, it's actually in some ways simpler. A simpler project because there's less moving parts. And yeah, so like the video editing, it's relatively simple. Figuring it out, since this is the first project I did, was incredibly complex. And I had a lot of issues with that. Because for software, like unlike Audacity, this software has so many revisions in such a short amount of time that the documentation on how to do it actually was pretty much non-existent at some points. For example, just finding out on the current version of the software how to import a video. It's this button right here. It took me probably 15 minutes of just clicking random stuff to find it. So I guess my only advice is, you know, either use something that's more official, like, you know, Adobe Premiere, if you have the, you know, tools for that, or, you know, commit yourself to a steep learning curve for just the initial functioning of the software, because as you can see, there are a lot of buttons and menus, and, you know, there's this down here. This is the timeline, right? This is very similar actually to Audacity. Audacity is essentially just the timeline with a couple of menus. So let me just go ahead and show you kind of what it looks like just with the finished product, these layers are not important, but you can see down here on layer 5, I have the audio. The first step, actually, I guess I should talk about just recording in the first place. So for the first step is to record the video, right? Like I said, you mime it. And actually, I can show you a video of a couple videos as a demo for kind of what that looked like for me. So let me go ahead and pull them up, and then I will show you. Let's see here. Okay, I got to go to this folder, and but yeah, basically, so for a cloning video, I looked it up. I Googled, what do I do here? How can I do this? And the most important thing is to simply have a camera on a tripod, or at the very least, set up on a stand that is, going to be extremely stable. You need to have some kind of remote way to activate your video recording. If you're using a phone or, a more official camera, you need to have a remote. Or like surgeon-like steady fingers, because if you bump that thing and the angle changes at all, like you're going to have a weird looking video, and it's very hard to fix that. So you need just a completely stable space, to record in, and then you basically just hop from one, section of the video to the other and record one at a time. So let me just open up this real quick. It's being slow. If you have any more questions, feel free to go for them.
Have you experimented with this, the video editing in something very, like a simpler program? Is there something that I don't know, like what comes on your computer? Like,
Windows Movie Maker is kind of the default for Windows people. There are a couple other, like photo editing softwares that do basic video editing, like cropping and stuff. You can't do any of this stuff with something less complex than VSDC, really. And I'll get into why that is. You might be able to do
iMovie.
Sorry.
Yeah.
You might be able to do iMovie for the Adagio for Strings video, because that is mostly just cropping videos, more or less.
Right.
But with audio syncing and with transitions between videos and stuff, I think you really want something at least as complex as this too.
Yeah. Got it.
I think, yeah. So this is the first part. I'll go ahead and share that. Okay. Hopping between programs here, sorry. Okay. Here we go. So, I have, if you can see, I guess you can't see with the play button, there's like my tablet is down here, which I had the Adagio or the Beethoven like files on with the click track, like what I was just showing you. It's that same exact project file. And what's in the rest of the video to the right does not matter at all, because, it's going to cut out very soon. But, just emptying the spit, hit play. I'm checking to make sure that my position is correct, because the thing about this, recording the video for this is actually really difficult, because even though none of the audio matters, the video absolutely does matter, especially for an audience of trombone players, because if you get the wrong position or you mess up just once out of a 7-minute take, you have to do the whole thing over again. And after recording 4 of these, I probably was recording video for like 2 hours just trying to get it right, because I didn't know the other parts very well, so I would make mistakes, and like your arms get pretty tired after a while. So, if you're not in a rush, obviously it's good to just take breaks. But the other thing is, you kind of have to record more or less at the same time of day, at least if you have outdoor lighting. If you're indoor, whatever, use your indoor lighting, that'd be easier. But for me, I didn't have that option in New York. So like I had to do quite a bit of video editing just to get it to look like it was taken more or less at the same time of day. So just playing this. Yeah. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, are you breathing and actually playing, or you're about to answer this for me? Are you just literally faking it?
You can fake it, but I think at least for quartets, when you can kind of see some facial expressions, I think it's better to just play along, because you'll get a more authentic, facial expression. Your chops will look correct. For the Adagio for Strings one, I did fake some of it, because it was just so much playing, so many long tones that I was just to the point of exhaustion. I would play the big important notes though, for sure. So. Sorry, let me go back just to get the click track in there. Right. So let me show you, actually, that's the original video audio. That's from my phone. Let me show you kind of a fun, this is kind of something I did just for fun. Basically, after editing everything, I took out the edited audio, the final product audio, and just left in all the video audio. So it's going to clip a little bit, but this kind of shows you how accurately I actually did play to the click track. Right. So I would say if you can't play your video at least 90% accurate to your, spliced and edited take, then you might need to practice more, because it's probably going to look inauthentic in the video. So you do need to actually be able to play the piece fairly well for this to work easily. You can make it work if you're going note by note and splicing everything, but I think it's just going to be more hassle than it's worth. Let me go ahead and exit out of this. So going back to the video editing, I will start at step 1. Always a good place to start. So I'm going to open up actually my, I have a couple of demo projects with things loaded in already. This might take a couple seconds. But basically, once you've figured out where the import button is for your video files and your audio files and whatnot, so you'll see here, kind of, this is what you would be looking at once you have everything imported in. You can see there's just one person sitting there. The rest of the videos are there, but they are currently covered up. Let me see, can I minimize this? I'm having to move video files out of the way. Okay, here we go. So in this, you're gonna see similar features, if not the exact same features, in pretty much any video editing software you find. So if you're not familiar with Photoshop, or if, you have to know about a concept called layers. It's not super important because you can kind of just follow this procedurally, but basically certain videos and certain objects take priority. So because this video first part is above the others, it takes priority, so it's going to play over everything else. I can actually move it out of the way, and you'll see, oh, look, there's second part, right? Let me put that back. So in order to get the other videos to play in their designated slots, you have to do something called an inverted mask. And what that is, it's essentially just an object, a rectangle, that normally would block off a section of the video, and the inverted mask just means, instead of blocking off everything that is not rectangle, block off everything that is not rectangle, right? There are a couple of ways to do this. You could do this with a green screen, for example. But masking is probably the most standard way to do it. So let me go ahead and demonstrate. Actually, I need to go ahead and cut this. I wanted to show kind of the very, very first step, which would basically just be to cut everything down to the same starting reference point. So, you have the lead in click track. Go ahead and play this so you can see what I mean. I cut it down to where there was one measure of click before the video started. And I want to make sure that's the same for every single video, so that when I sync up the video and the audio, I'm not having issues. So for example, I would do something like that. That's a little bit off. Cut that, modify the track. And there we go. So you can kind of see down here in the timeline, these videos are more or less the same length now. So masking. Let's go ahead and do that. So here's the rectangle feature. There are probably other shapes you could use. I think rectangle is probably the most common. There are some options here that aren't super important. You just want to make sure, like whole parent duration, that your object that you're creating lasts for the same amount of time that your video does, because otherwise it'll disappear on you and then you'll have a blocked off video again. So, and also I think this is probably the same on most video editing software. You want to, actually, sorry, I need to do something. You want to make sure you're adding an object to a new layer, because if you insert it to the layer, it won't necessarily affect the right, it won't affect all the other layers when it's essentially allowing them to come through. So these like that setting, just having it add to new layer versus add insert to layer versus another thing, those options can be a little bit tricky and confusing. And essentially I just did trial and error until it worked. Like I said, the documentation for this was not super great. Excuse me. But considering there's only 3 options, it didn't take long to figure it out. So now that I have my rectangle set up, I'm going to go ahead and draw it over the section that I actually want to play. You can see it's blocking it off right now. You also want to overlap it a little bit with the next section, and you'll see why in a bit. But right now it's not doing the thing we want it to do. So first we have to make it the same color as the background. And I didn't cover this, but when you're starting a project, you can choose the background color that if I were to move every video out of the way, the background is just black, right? And the reason for that is complicated, but essentially when you choose inverted mask, it makes everything that does not match the background color displayed. So you can see already, now I have 2 people on screen. A little bit of a, that's cut off. That's fine. We can adjust it. And then we just do that for every other layer going into the video like this, rectangle. I don't necessarily need to do this for the whole thing. I'm just going to go ahead and do this to get at least 3 people on. So you can see the rectangle is not showing. That means that's because of the priority that this first video has. It's fine. This side doesn't matter nearly as much as this side, but you just want to make sure you're covering up the right portion, making sure the color is black. It is. Going back to this section, blend, inverted mask. Okay, so I might as well do the next one. It doesn't take long. Okay, so going to go ahead and make another rectangle. And I making this seem simple. The concept is pretty simple, but like I said, finding the buttons for all these things was a nightmare and a half. And it probably took me about I would just say I had to restart this project several times just from messing things up, not knowing how to organize things, not knowing what buttons were affecting what parts. So it probably took me about 4 or 5 hours to actually just get this far, right? So let me go ahead and zoom in a little bit so you can see the video better, because I'm going to get to why you need to overlap more. And this is off somehow. You can see how I think I moved a video up or down. And obviously you don't want that in your final video. So let me figure out which one that is. Sorry, here we go. I think it's the second layer, the second part. So, okay, that's first. Let's see here. Okay, that's all lined up again. We're good. Thankfully, aligning videos is not nearly as difficult as figuring out the mask business. So, you can see here that we're not quite at the finished product. You can see the lines very clearly. So what you want to do is, let me go to the, I'm missing an option here that would be useful. Let me see if I can change that. There we go. Okay. So Objects Explorer, trying to get it to, there we go. So here we have, every single layer and object in the project in this left-hand side. You can get to everything in the timeline, but it's just simply it's a lot more simple to see what you want to affect over here in the Object Explorer. So what we want to do is add some blur to the rectangles. And this is kind of where the magic happens. The inverted mask is definitely, the most crucial step for this kind of video. But, for added polish, you want to right-click or go into the editor options, whatever works on the particular software you're using, and you want to add blur, which in this software is going to be under filters. There's a lot of different kinds of blur, but Gaussian seems to be the best for this. So making sure that it's going to last for the entire duration of the clip. Add new layer again. Okay, so it's not doing anything yet. We have to adjust some settings over here in the properties window. So let me go to blur. There we go. Okay. So right now the blur is very low here in these blur levels, but also you have to extend the boundaries. These are things that I just kind of Googled, right? So I probably would not be able to figure this out without the help of Google. But if you look at the video, you can kind of see, oh, hang on. That's not what I wanted. Hang on a second. I must have accidentally applied the blur to the actual video instead of the rectangle. So let me try that again. Video effects, filters, blur. Yes, apply it to the object I want to apply it to. sometimes the reminders for this just are kind of nonsensical. So extend the boundaries. You'll notice if I turn this off, it goes back to just a solid line. You can see it cutting off my arm a little bit there. You can actually make it more apparent, right? I'm not exactly sure. Hang on. What extend the boundaries does, but I think it just it does something. It works. That's all I know. That's all you need to know. But you can see if I did not, you can see the end of the second part's rectangle. If I meet it exactly, you'll notice that there's no blur. There's hardly any blur, right? So you definitely want to have some room in between your players to overlap the rectangles a little bit. You can see it kind of cuts into the stand there a little bit. That's okay in my mind. Anyway, you would do this for all 4 of the videos, and then from there, you would then, if I have to correct white balance, say this section on the right side is more white than this, which is kind of more red. You can go into the actual video, and adjust, say, the red, green, blue, or the contrast or gamma or bright. I'll go to the brightness, contrast, gamma. Add new layer again. So brightness levels, if I want to make it less bright, no, actually, I think I would want to make it more bright. It may not be super apparent over Zoom, but you can kind of mess with this to make the walls look like they're, more or less the same color, right? And that's essentially it for the video editing. Once you've done those 3 steps, inverted mask with the rectangles, blur, and then adjust for white balance or color balance, then the video is mostly done. So let's go to probably maybe I think the most difficult step, which would be simply syncing audio and video. And this is going to be the same for Adagio for strings as well. I need to move the Zoom video again. Hang on. Right. Okay, there we go. So let me move up the timeline so it's much more apparent what I'm doing. So again, this is where your organization needs to be very high, because simply, like, you can move the videos around wherever you want, but getting them to sync up exactly down to the beat is a very precise task. And it's relatively easy to line up audio in an audio editor. Video editing, there are definitely, I think even this has the ability to automatically, quote unquote, line up audio to video, but it's not very good for classical music. So you'll probably end up syncing things, syncing up the audio and video manually. So just to go through my process for that, basically, you notice the audio, you can already see the waveform, but it's not very big. Like, I can actually compare it to the waveform of the video. Show waveform. I want to blow that up a little bit. Okay, it's going to take a little bit of time to render the audio. Let me see if I can. Yeah, I apologize for my slow computer. If some of you take lessons with me, maybe I'll be able to buy a bigger one. Yeah, while I'm waiting on this, because it is crucial that I can see the audio. It may have actually glitched out a bit when I moved it. So let me go ahead and move this down in layers and try a different one. Or not. Are there any questions so far on what I've covered? I realize there's really a lot of material. I'm having to kind of zoom through it.
Yeah, it's pretty technical, but there might be. Yeah, I'm sorry. Someone has a question?
Yeah, I had a question about, we've seen like the acapella videos where like you can clearly see the borders and it's like not straight across as you're doing. So why did you choose to do this instead of like the 4 boxes or whatever, I guess?
You mean like cloning rather than doing like what I did for Adagio for strings, where it's just all in separate boxes?
Yeah, yeah.
Well, I mean, to be honest, mostly because I just wanted to see if I could. The first time I ever saw a cloning video, it was a YouTuber, Freddie Greddy. He's Swedish, and he did a lot of like TV song medleys or video game song medleys, and he would do a lot of them on his couch, where he would appear to be in this, clones of himself, and I just thought that was so cool. So I mean, that's a lot of it. But from an artistic perspective, I think it's just much more visually impressive for at least a quartet that's as complex as Beethoven is. I think it's just, one, it allows the user to kind of see the entire product visually more readily. Like I think if I were in 4 separate boxes in a grid, I think it might be a little bit confusing to know where to look. Whereas on this, you can kind of take in the whole picture all at once, right? So there are some psychological aspects too. For Adagio, unless I, had a much bigger house, I couldn't do cloning at all. So there really wasn't even a choice. But also because the melody shifts a lot more often in that piece, I thought it was important to be able to change the dimensions of each individual part, whenever I wanted to highlight something. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
John, let me ask you, would it be, so they're going to have, I think, some large projects or some big ideas of 4, 5, 6 part things that they can do. The best thing would be just to like do a couple duets and just like kind of start small and do short little things and just to kind of practice and get a sense of how it goes, right? What is your recommendation? Or should they just dive in?
I mean, you certainly can dive in. I would say doing large projects like a trombone choir for audio editing, that's very manageable. It's doable if you know how to merge tracks. Say when you're splicing, you record a new section. If you can do that and keep your tracks neat, where you only have one track for each part, not a whole bunch of little parts that you have to mesh together eventually. Like you can do large projects, but I think it's definitely better to start small, especially for video editing, because the moving parts get very complex very quickly, and it's also extremely tedious once you actually get to editing all the little fine details. Like I haven't gotten to, like how you have to silence each and every track. So for this, it's easy on Beethoven because I'm just, I click silence on one track and bam, I do that 4 times, it's done. You'll see in just a second, I'm going to wrap this up so we have time for questions, but like you'll see on Adagio for strings, there are about maybe 100 or 120 layers. And if you're doing something as crazy as editing a whole symphony together, like what Steve Peterson does, you have possibly thousands of layers and thousands of cuts. And so like you definitely want to learn a process for organization with something smaller first, I think, at least for video editing.
Great, thanks. Yeah.
So just going to audio syncing, because this one actually took me a while to figure out a good way to do it. Basically, you see the problem here is that our audio track is very tiny. So basically, you can simply just amplify it temporarily. I'll amplify it by about like 50 decibels or something. Maybe not quite that much for this. But once you go back out, you'll notice if I go to resulting signal right, if it ever pops up, you'll see that it's much bigger, like to the point where it's just a line. But the start of it is very clear now, right? If you can see that. So what I would do here, because you want the video to start kind of more or less right at the beginning or close to the beginning. You don't want to move the video out to match the audio because then you'll just have an uneditable blank space. I may not be able to move files if I think my computer's not having a fit right now doing the screen sharing and whatnot. But right, so basically you would just cut this. I can do a thing right here where I just select a section that I want to cut, split it up. Now that's 2 sections, and now I can just delete that. And it should delete in a second. No, there we go. And then I just move this, to a layer that it's not supposed to be at. But the point is, it should be it should be on top here, and then I can then adjust this. You can even go into settings. Oh my God, sorry, this thing is being crazy right now. If you'll notice here in the properties window, object creation time. Let's see. Yeah, this is not working. Object creation time, right now is very high. That's not supposed to be there, but you could adjust it by 1 frame, 2 frames, etc. And I'm talking about frames because in most video editors you cannot adjust timescales that are less than a frame. So in this case, I opened the project at 60 frames a second. So you have roughly like 0.03 seconds per frame or something like that, right? And you cannot adjust any more than that. So if something does not line up, then you're kind of out of luck. So even if your video is only at like 30 frames a second or something, I would definitely recommend opening your project in a higher frame rate. You could do even 120 frames a second or something so that you can edit it more readily. Okay, it's giving me trouble, but let me go ahead and go to Adagio for strings, because like I said, oh, here we go. Okay, actually, let me stick with this for a second just to show you kind of what I would do to sync the video. I mean, it's really all visual. If you have a powerful computer, you can definitely check, like right here, you can hit play for the preview and just check if it's synced up or not, basically. I do not have a PC capable of that, so I essentially would check visually, and then I would actually have to go to export and render the whole thing to check later on. So yeah, this audio starts right here where my cursor is, so I would actually just move this approximately to where I think it is, and then I would just go over here to creation time and adjust the frames up or down to match more succinctly. So you can see right there, that's basically at the same time, right? And then for the other videos, you can see the little clicks right here, the click tracks. You can then, adjust this so it's matching the exact click you want. And once you have that for every single video, you never have to worry about it again. That is assuming your organization is good. So I'm going to go more into that in Adagio, because that is this, like I said, this is relatively simple minus the cloning section, the inverted mask. Adagio, the actual like project management, is extremely complicated. So let me go ahead and let's see, go to my projects. This is another project that I took about 2 takes to get right, because my first one was really messy. If we have time, I can actually show you my original take at getting this project done, and you can see what I mean by messy. It's literally just, videos are just not synced up properly. The ends and starts of them are all in different places, and turns out that kind of thing matters. So it looks like, because of time, I'm going to have to gloss over a little bit of how I would approach Adagio. In a lot of ways, Adagio for strings is a much simpler project. There's no real video editing to speak of, minus cropping and like maybe some fade outs and that kind of thing. But because I chose to do lots of different takes and resizing videos and whatnot, it actually ended up taking way more time. It was just, like I said, very tedious, labor-intensive work. And once this opens up, you'll see why. But effectively, when you cut a video and you put it into a different layer, that's a whole separate video with its own settings. And so if I silence one video, I have to silence all the others. If I fade out one, I have to fade out all 80 to 100 layers. There almost certainly is an easier way to do bulk things like that, but I couldn't seem to find a way to do multiple like silence edits to multiple layers in this particular software. I'm sure there's an option for that. But just if you're kind of new to this, it may not be readily apparent. So going to the timeline here, I'm just going to go ahead and scroll down so you kind of see what I'm talking about with how many layers there are. So, right, you have the sound right here, and then every fade out I did is another block, right? It goes all the way down. Some of them are very small. And then once I get to the end, because all 8 parts are playing for the rest of the piece, I just didn't bother to do anything extra. I could have, but I didn't, because I was really tired of editing at that point. So let me zoom in. You can see this first video right here starts just by itself. And then you'll see right here let me zoom in some more, that there's some overlap. That, if I can actually get it to display properly, this overlap right here allows time for in under the surface. You can actually see it up here, a little bit of that fade out happening. So if I were to just have these start right, right at the same time, then it would just like, there would be no fade out. It would just pop. And so that overlap is actually way more complicated than it shouldn't be that complicated, basically. So let me go to my demo file just to demonstrate real quick, basically the bulk of the work here. Again, I'm having to gloss over some relatively minor editing things. Like I said, the silencing, the fade in, fade outs, the cropping. Cropping is more difficult than it should be as well, but just want to demonstrate kind of how I would have to do this. Let's assume this is already synced up. So I want to have a new section of video pop up here where I will crop different, I'll crop it in a different configuration, right? So essentially what I would do, I would go into cutting and splitting, and I would find the exact moment that I want to crop, or that I want to, you know, reconfigure. So I'm gonna play this a little bit. Let's just say it's right there because my computer is messing up. Okay, so add a marker. Now I have a marker where I want to make the cut. That will make it actually automatically cuts it for me. Let me zoom in. So you can see that's cut right there. I basically just have to cut the same spot for this other video, and if my computer will cooperate, we can get there. So essentially what I'm going to be doing is just moving these to a different layer. But what that does, it doesn't, that's not gonna work actually. We'll see if I can make this work. Okay. So just highlighting both of them. Trying to just drag them down. You can just literally drag and drop. Okay, so I'm gonna try to tidy this up a little bit so you can see what I would actually be working with. Okay, I'm not sure it's gonna work, but basically, once you make the cut and you have all that, like I would not be using this bottom video, so I would delete that, except it's not gonna work. But basically you just drag these to the back here. At least in this software, you cannot extend video forwards after you make a cut. It's essentially, even if you drag this file here forwards, it's just not there. Like there's nothing there. So you have to drag it backwards. And that was the mistake I made in my first version of this. I would drag these forward, not realizing that every time I did that, I essentially made every subsequent video and other layers offset by quite a bit, and so audio syncing just did not work. However, if you do it this way, making clean cuts every time, this is not a clean cut, but you can see now it's kind of all tidied up. If I opened up the waveforms, you would see that they're exactly synced up, right? Because by pulling this to the left, it actually starts the video earlier in the sequence. So these are perfectly synced up. Once this is synced up right at the beginning, no matter how many cuts you make, I could cut here again, and actually, let me do that. I could cut here again and drag them into another layer, and it would still be synced up. Like I said, I did not do that properly the first time, so I had to just completely start over. In other words, I think it's important to just make sure that after you sync up your audio, that any edits you make to the video don't mess with that audio syncing, because that is, that is by far the easiest way to mess your project up. Like I just did now, I'd have to go back. I can do this again, right? It is lined up more or less, and I just dragged this back. Actually, that's not correct. Whatever, it's not cooperating. But basically, like if these are lined up perfectly, you then, because it's still synced, you then can actually drag it back this way. I think that's more or less the bulk of it. There are definitely a lot of details that I wish I could talk about. There's just not enough time.
Hey, John, this is really great. It's super technical. I don't know. I think everybody will try, to do what they can. It doesn't necessarily have to be, in terms of the project that I've asked them to do. It'll be just kind of experimentation. It'll be trial and error, as you said, and that
right.
Sounds like how you kind of learned. So let me ask one big kind of overarching question, and then I'm gonna let anybody else has a question specifically to ask. why did you do this? Number one, and like, what's the? I mean, what is your motivation behind it? And number two, did it make you better?
Yeah. Number two, I can definitely answer right off the bat. Yes, it did. Made me better as a player for sure. I mean, any kind of recording project that I do, it forces you to really take stock of what you can and can't do at the moment, and it forces you to be able to do it much more quickly. It's kind of on the line. You don't want to try to finish a project and then it takes you a month to be able to play a part. I think there's just a greater motivation to improve. It's also, of course, just fun to do these projects, at least for me. I really like seeing the final product. It's a lot of labor for sure, but it really doesn't feel like it when you're going through it. As far as my motivations, I mean, like I said, I am out of work right now. So a lot of it was just boredom and wanting to do something that felt fulfilling to me. And I also just kind of wanted to have some demonstrations of my arrangements that I did. Both of these are my arrangements, and I wanted to kind of play them how I imagine them going, especially for the purpose of selling those arrangements. That is definitely a more practical consideration. But I think mostly I just like doing recording projects like this, and I had never done a cloning video or done video editing of this caliber, and I thought it was I had the time to pick up those skills, and maybe it was time to do that.
That's great. And do you think that, I mean, I see orchestras, both small and large, and chamber groups and individuals putting stuff out almost on a daily basis of this nature. My sense is that it's advancing our craft and kind of keeping art out there. People seem to be paying attention to it. I don't think it's just musicians listening to musicians, do their thing. I think it's getting out there on social media and on a broader scale. And I think it highlights what we do. I think it's important. We have to market ourselves and kind of sell ourselves and do it in a way that's compelling and professional. And I think you've obviously done that. And that's why you're here to talk about that. But so I'm done. Does anybody have some questions or thoughts that you'd like to ask? John, just jump in. Or not.
I can kind of maybe summarize my thoughts because I do it is very technical. I focus on the technical stuff, even though I know a lot of people will be using different softwares than what I used. I do think that the general format, the general techniques that I used are going to be more or less the same for these kind of videos across different editing platforms. For example, if you are more Logic and Pro Tools kind of person, definitely check out Steve Peterson's video that he did for the San Antonio Symphony. It's on his YouTube page. But like when he talks about it, he's talking about the same things: the cropping, the editing, the splicing, the auto tuning. Sometimes, what it looks like will be slightly different. But I hope that maybe you guys got a sense of the flow of how I went through these things. If not the exact details, you're not going to be tested on exactly which button I clicked.
Great. While I'm trying to find Steve Peterson's video so I can post it in the chat, you guys jump in if any final thoughts or questions. We have about 7 or 8 minutes.
I think his YouTube's called The Peterson Project.
That's right. And Steve came here. Were you here, John, when he came and did that video for? I think you were gone.
Yeah.
He came and spoke and did a little miniature movie and showed us how to break it down, and it was awesome. So what is the name of the video that he has? It's just the symphony, like the whole thing? Or,
yeah. I think it's a Mahler something or the other.
Oh, okay. Well, I will try to find it at some point. Looks like I'm not going to find it right now. I'm not going to get it now. Anyway.
Anything in the works we can get a sneak peek of? Yeah, actually. I can show you the awful first attempt at doing my impetu, arrangement. So let me pull that up.
Now that's the one that you did with the quartet at
yeah
Eastern, right? Yeah.
Yeah. The thing is, I tried a different method and it failed. I tried to. Actually, do I even have it on? I may not have it on this. Yeah, I don't have it on this PC, so unfortunately I can't show it. Ooh. I don't think. Yeah, sorry. Um, but basically, the long story short is that that arrangement is just incredibly technical from a coordination perspective because like it's da 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 da, you know, one part of it da 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 da, you know, and just coordinating that is really difficult, even with the click track, and it's just all over the place. I'll see if I can kind of do a pull it up on my tablet because that's where I recorded it on before we finish. So yeah. Other than that, I've just been busy moving, essentially packing and moving. Excuse me. Once I'm in Texas, I actually have a couple projects in the works. One of them is kind of a secret. I want to make sure I actually have a handle. It's a really big project. Definitely something you'll hear about if I can actually figure out all the requirements I would need to do to actually get it done. But it would basically be a practice tool. I'll say that much. The other one is, like I said, Impact 2. I think that's the next quartet I want to record, and it's probably going to be another cloning video.
Cool.
So yeah.
Well, I was surprised to learn that you actually do basically a sound recording like you would for a CD or anything else, and then kind of overdub or mime on top of that. It makes perfect sense. In a way, I'm relieved because I didn't know how you would possibly do all of that. And I mean, that's my. I was not that I'm less impressed with your playing. I just, you know, I'm actually relieved that's how you did it in some ways. So
No, I was kind of worried that I would come across as a fake in that regard too. You know, I mean, we're kind of somehow not even directly told. I think it's just some idea that we get from somewhere that like if you don't do it completely live from start to finish, then it's not a real take. And I think you can do that kind of stuff for sure with like duets, but quartets and up and things that are as difficult as the Beethoven, I just feel like it's not really feasible.
Now, can I ask you? I don't put you on the spot a little bit, but don't. And if you don't, I mean, forgive me. I can't help myself. On your TMEA etudes, was that a mime along with your sound project, or was that actually videoed? Yeah. Oh man. You son of a gun.
Actually, not actually. No, that one is actually. There are splices in it. I will say that. But the video is recorded with the audio in that particular version. Basically, when they cut the camera in and out, that's a splice most of the time.
Right. But there's a couple where okay. Yeah, I had done that years before, and that was the only way I could come up with a way to actually video record with the sound and the video on the same device, and then do splices. We used to have to have two cameras.
Yeah, two cameras
which works.
Makes
it. It's just you know, it just takes a lot of time.
Right. Yeah, it's a lot of there's a decent amount of post editing. I would say like there's not anything on there that is spliced to the degree I was talking about, where it's like a note is spliced into another.
Right.
Note, you know, it's
right.
But yeah, there are definitely large chunks of it that are, you know, from different takes. And they use a click track for the ones you can use a click track. The ones that are not click track are way harder because you can't rely on splices. You know, like you have to get very big chunks of it until you have a pause.
Right.
Yeah. It looks like I'm probably not going to be able to pull up that file in time. Let me see. Oh, wait. Here we go. So I don't know how well this will come across over, you know, another laptop, but just you can at least hear it, I think. Okay.
Yeah.
So this is kind of the project. I don't know if you can see that at all. Okay. All right. So I'm going to play it next to the mic. So you can hear just how off it is on a scratch tape. I only did about the first maybe 20 bars of that or so, but it was really not working out. So I have to figure out another method to help make that more accurate, or practice the parts. Actually, that would probably help because I haven't played them in years.
Yeah. Well, John, we probably need to let everybody go, but I want to thank you again so much for coming and for doing this. It's been very technical, but I think very helpful, and I think we're going to benefit from this greatly. So thank you so much, and always welcome to stop by, and we will continue to follow you, and so proud of all that you're doing, of course. And thanks for
Thank
you're
you.
so generous, and we appreciate your time. It means a lot. I know you're a busy man and you've got everything going on, and we hope that you get to go back to work soon. And I think it's a matter of time, personally. The Mets not going away, right? So
Yeah, well, one can
yeah,
hope
so,
not.
no, it's not.
Yeah. Yeah,
So,
if you guys have any questions that we didn't get to cover or that pop up, feel free to email me. I'll try to get back to you guys in a timely manner.
yeah. Okay. Well, thanks, John. And I will. We'll talk about how we want to upload and where we want to put this video. But let's give him a round of applause. And thank you, sir. You're a wonderful friend and a hero to all of us. So we'll be in touch.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Okay. All right. Take care.